between Tacoma and Berrien, between King County and Pierce County and the ports, and how that all fits together. And then Hung will come back and talk about the Triangle Project and give you a little bit of an update on that. So that's the intent for the evening. And as we continue, and obviously we want to be here to answer any questions that you might have and give you some clarity on the program. So go back to 2015. Legislature puts in place a 16-year, $16 billion statewide program. The number one project on there was the Puget Sound Gateway program. With that, they gave these directions, what they call budget provisos, that this will be a single investment. There is one fund to complete 167 between Puyallup and basically Port Tacoma. That same fund is going to complete 509 coming out of SeaTac and going down to the Star Lake interchange at 272nd. So we have one fund for that. We were asked to work with our affected stakeholders. Desiree mentioned we have put together what we have an executive committee and a steering committee, and we'll talk a bit more about that, and to come up with a plan for that. And they wanted to make sure these projects were built in a sequence that was logical. They did not want to see 167 built first, and then what was left over would be built 509 or vice versa. So that's some of the direction that we received. 2017, the legislature then gave an update. And they asked the Secretary of Transportation, which partly includes myself here, to develop a memorandum of understanding of local project stakeholders that identifies effectively a commitment that the legislature took on to develop $130 million towards this project, and to do that by July 1st of 18. So effectively in the last year, we've been working through an understanding with 18 jurisdictions, as I mentioned, to how do we come together on some type of an understanding. And we know that some jurisdictions are going to have a lot of benefit, higher benefit, others will have less benefit, and we've been working through a process of that. And Steve will speak a little bit more to that later here. We were also asked to look at how we could accelerate the schedule on the program. As I mentioned, the legislature passed a 16-year, $16 billion program, but the money is over 16 years, going all the way out to year 2031. That is a long time before you start seeing the benefits of these transportation investments. The reasons for that is they wanted to do what they call pay-as-you-go. You have to buy your gallon of gas in order to pay your gas tax. It goes to the Department of Revenue to overpay this. This is all unexpected revenue coming in the future. They did not want to bond the program like they've done previously, and so that is basically pulls us out to be a 16-year program. But we've also been asked, could we look to accelerate it, and there's some financing things of that nature, so we won't get into that tonight, but if you're interested, we can talk about it. We also got some directions that savings in the project will stay in this project and not go to another project, say in Spokane. This is the structure that we're using with our stakeholders. Obviously, the governor and the legislature are driving state policy here. WSDOT, who I represent here. We are working with public outreach. We are working with the 167 Exec Committee and 509 Exec Committee. In fact, we meet jointly. That is typically made up of the mayors or council members or appointed authorities to participate in there. We have 25 agencies involved with that Exec Committee. We have a steering committee made up of public works directors and others and staff, and as we work through that. And so that's kind of our governance structure. And so when we think about this is kind of how that all comes together. And as I've looked at it, just kind of a case in point, if you take Tacoma all the way to Berrien, that's actually more people living in that geographical area, which will include Federal Way, than any other city in the state. It's actually very sizable here, obviously, and we're working. So how do we work together, even though we're broken up into these different jurisdictions? This is important for the context of funding before I get into the project. This is the kind of what I call the four spheres we're working with. The legislature basically put out $1.6 billion of state gas tax money towards this project and dedicated that in the future to come. We are then dealing with the question of tolls, and that will be something I'll talk a little bit more here after Steve talks. Tolls is a way to basically finance it, but it's also a way to manage the traffic so we don't have to build as big of a facility and we can actually phase it and be able to go right size the project. We have a major federal grant that we're pursuing that we submitted under the Obama administration. We had to resubmit under the Trump administration, and we're hoping to hear next month or two regarding that and that status. But we think we have a project that serves national interest because you're talking about getting freight to the ports, and our ports being the fourth largest cargo port in the nation. We compete with Savannah. We have access to the Asian market. We're competing with Canadian ports. And though this is a way of getting that kind of that last miles into the port areas for freight. And we have support from Eastern Washington, fruit growers. We actually have support above the northern tier states all the way to Illinois coming across the northern areas to want to get access to this port. So we recognize there's a local aspect, there's a regional, there's a state, but there's also a national aspect, and that's part of what we're pursuing our funding. And then Steve will talk more about this $130 million local contribution component that was basically a commitment to the legislature by a number of parties. And what we need to do now is put a little more framework around that and come to an understanding as to what that would be. Excuse me.
You mentioned that there were other parties in other states involved. Are they paying for this at all?
Only if we get federal dollars.
Right.
Only if we get with the federal dollars. We're not actually going to get money directly from an Idaho or an Illinois, but we have had their support.
But they will be getting the benefit of it, won't they?
That would be true, but that would also be unprecedented from the standpoint of one state giving another state. That's what the federal government is here for, is really to do that.
Well, I'm not counting on the federal government at this point in time. It just kind of bugs me that I'm paying a toll going down there for other states to be able to come in here and not contribute.
Well, we can get into the tolling conversation a little bit later. I would say that whoever uses the facility is actually paying for the facility. So if they're out of state, they would be paying for that, and their goods would be coming across paying for that. But I would not have any expectation that Montana is going to be putting any money into a project like this nature. So with that, this is kind of just the funding as to kind of the flow goes all the way out. The blue is the state dollars, the green being the local contribution we talked about, and the toll funding being here, $180 million towards the end of the program that comes in. And then with that, I want to give you a bit, we've been working with our committee structure. Sometimes I call this my NCAA chart because we've been working through kind of brackets and getting things down. But we in 2003 and 2006, we completed environmental impact statements to complete 509 up in King County and 167 down in Pierce County. These projects have been sitting, waiting for funding, not going anywhere. In fact, we started on this project in 1991, so part of my career has just been following some of these going through. We now have this moment to complete them, and that's what we're trying to accomplish, is how to get them completed. But we also had basically half the funding provided by the legislature, about our target about $1.9 billion to build these. So we're having to work through kind of the details. We have an agreement now on kind of all the interchanges, the lanes, the configurations of our executive committee. So this is what we call, but basically you have to have a scope, your schedule, and your budget to all be balanced, and so we've been working through that. So let me just walk you through the project real quickly. So the 509 update, if you look to the right of this picture, you can see the airport and Burien. I always love to say that the former mayor of SeaTac called that the biggest cul-de-sac in the state. You come up 509 and just boom, you're 188, and where do you go? We've always planned, and in fact, if you go back in history, 509 was going to go all the way down through Des Moines. We bought right away through Des Moines in the early 70s. It was going to continue down basically around 16th to go through Federal Way and tie into 509 down the Comensa Bay. That's why it's called 509. It was going to be a parallel freeway to I-5 back in the 50s and kind of early 60s. Basically, development happened, funding dried up. So what we're doing is we're rerouting 509 here over to I-5 south of the airport. There will be interchanges south of the airport and ultimately a south access into the airport. So instead of having to go all the way around the north end, you'll be able to come in the south end. So any trips south of the airport will be able to directly go to that place. So that will be a benefit for anybody in Federal Way as well as down into Pierce County and for points south. We do some improvements along I-5, including additional lane all the way down to the 272nd interchange here, which is off to your left of that. So right there at Star Lake and where that transit station will be, that's where the last lane will then end at that point. The timing also is good because we are building the Sound Transit Federal Way link extension at the same time we're building this. What you're seeing here in orange is about $1 billion of investment, and what you're seeing in the blue from Federal Way link extension is about $1 billion investment. Every square foot that we don't use, they want, because they want to be right up against the interstate, except where they pull off to go to the stations. We're going to be doing this in stages. The red area gets built between 2021 and 2025. The green area gets built between 2025 and 2030. So that auxiliary lane I mentioned down the Federal Way would come in that latter period. Then this is just kind of a look at the right-of-way. That green area, that's that right-of-way I mentioned we bought all the way through Federal Way back in the early 70s. It's been there unused. That was eventually going to go all the way down 16th, like I said, all the way through through this area of South King County. We are going to surplus that property, use those assets to help build this project. And then you can see the red and the yellow, those are the properties that we currently have, and what we're purchasing, we're probably over 50% of the right-of-way already purchased at this point, and working with the port and the city of SeaTac for that. Federal Way Link Extension, as mentioned, we are definitely joined at the hip with them, and how that's being constructed. As they get ready to go, they're starting to, basically right now, they're starting to advertise for contractors to start to come in and get ready to build that, as you well know. Next steps for us, a lot of right-of-way, getting ready, coordination with Sound Transit, working with King County on a trail system, and so forth, and we're kind of working through these as an element. But our main project for us won't go to construction until 2021. So just going down south now to 167 in Pierce County, as Desiree said, it's kind of on the other side of Federal Way, coming in from the back side, depending which way's front or back. You basically have 167 coming down through Sumner, gets to Puyallup at Meridian, and ends right there. And so what we'll be doing is picking that up at the Meridian interchange just north of Puyallup and the Puyallup River, continuing over what we call Valley Avenue. There'll be an interchange there. Comes over to I-5. There will be an interchange at I-5, and then it will swing over and tie into the 509 on the Tide Flats area by the Port of Tacoma. With that, this is about 6 miles in duration. This is just a little bit north of $1 billion for this. Again, Sound Transit will be coming in with their Tacoma Dome Link extension, and so we are coordinating with them on how they're going to get through this particular area, as well as where the 5 station will be located. But everything then coming down from Highway 18, coming down this area is very important, and how that will operate. And one of the reasons I wanted Hung to come today and talk about the Triangle Project, because how this interchange operates is impacted by how the Triangle Project will operate and how traffic is moving. But this will also relieve traffic off of Highway 18, because trucks, instead of going up and down Peasley Canyon, will want to take the flatter route and kind of round through the valley. And also Sumner Pacific Manufacturing Industrial Center is a major distribution center for that port traffic coming in and out. Staging-wise, what we'll be doing here, our first little project is in blue. We'll actually be building a bridge on 70th over in the Fife area. That will actually go to construction next year. The red area, that will go to construction in 2021. And then the green area will go to construction out in 2025. Again, pretty long time frames given the cash flow that we have. It's also important to note that, as you know, the Puyallup Tribe of Indians, their reservations on this particular area, so we're coordinating closely with them on that, and we have some property and other elements that we're working with them on. This is the right-of-way. Basically, we got over 75% of the right-of-way already acquired for this particular project through past funding for moving forward. And then to kind of next steps, we're working through, but again, similar discussion that I had before, but a lot of work to happen on that particular facility. I will note at this point that the plan originally was to be 6 lanes each direction. So the inside lanes are going to be HOV lanes. These plans are actually going to be 2 lanes each direction, so 4 lanes going forward. And with the tolling, which I'll come back and talk to you, you can keep the volumes to a place that those 4 lanes will then operate into the future. So that's kind of an important point, but that's allowed us to kind of size the project accordingly. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you. This project received a great deal of money from the legislature, over $1.5 billion, and that's a pretty heavy lift. It's easy to forget at this point that it was really a coalition of local governments that helped to make that happen, to kind of lift this project over the final hurdle of it will be one of the projects funded, one of the largest projects funded, or it will be on the cutting room floor. And that was done by a coalition of cities, counties, and the 2 ports, proposing to raise a portion of the money locally. And at the time, there was the local contribution construct out there was a little different than it is today. It had an assumption of private sector contribution and contribution from the Puyallup tribe. But over the ensuing couple of years, it became clear that it was going to be hard to monetize. Like, for example, private sector contributions would really have to form a huge local improvement district that would involve the port, not something that was likely going to occur. So we modified the local contribution construct and plugged that gap with an assumption of grants that we would go and seek to try to make up the difference in the funding table between what we thought was actually doable and what might ultimately cause our effort to fail. A key aspect of that was trying to reduce the burden of the local contribution assumption on the local governments that end up having to contribute. It's a difficult case to make to just contribute city money to a freeway project. So we needed to have a different kind of construct around how to raise the money and make sure that the amount of money contributed by individual cities was something that you could actually have a council meeting on and successfully get out of the council chambers with a decision. So the grant strategy was used to reduce the burden on those local partnerships. In order to do that, we had to figure out who received the most benefit because the committee that works with us on this effort made a policy decision 6 or 7 months ago that the amount of contributions expected from local agencies to meet this local contribution schedule would be proportional to the amount of benefit the agencies receive. So we went through an extensive process of assessing the benefits of all of the agencies and the two counties, all of the cities, the 2 counties, and the 2 ports to determine where greater benefit existed versus lesser benefit. And that produced this tiering structure. The idea behind the tiers is that those agencies with the highest benefit contribute the most towards the match to leverage the grants that we're now seeking. And the agencies at the bottom of the spectrum, Tier 3 cities, mostly received regional benefits. The benefits of Tier 3 agencies really couldn't be differentiated from a city that's far away from South King County or North Pierce County. Citizens of that city and freight from that city may use the project at some point, but it was hard to sort of point out the specific measurable benefit difference that a particular agency would receive. The big drivers behind being a Tier 1 agency and therefore doing the favor to the project of contributing more of the overall match is if an agency received direct access to the facility. And as you've heard, this facility is on both sides of us here in Federal Way, but the direct access is in neighboring cities. So when this benefit assessment was done, Federal Way turned out to receive mostly regional benefits, not insignificant benefits, but hard to specify down to something that we might consider to be special benefit. So ultimately, Federal Way was classified as Tier 3. And you'll see the implications of that here in a minute. To operationalize all of this local partnership, which is a heavy lift, by the way. I mean, big projects like this are difficult to produce anyway, but going out and cutting an 18-way deal with local government to share in costs and fundraise together is a pretty significant level of effort. That's all documented in the Memorandum of Understanding, which is now in final draft form and will be going to city councils in the next 2 weeks. The MOU establishes who are the participating parties, contains the background and purpose statements. It specifies the local funding strategy and the participation policies that the subcommittee that works with us on this effort of all of the partners previously adopted. The benefit assessment methodology, the tiering structure, which I just described, and then the local jurisdiction contributions. So how much these Tier 1 and Tier 2 agencies will contribute toward the match, and how much money we are seeking to pursue from grants all specified in the MOU. And that MOU is destined to come to you in the next month or so for consideration as a signatory. That brings me to the match that's being paid and the grant assumptions. As you can see on this chart, Federal Way is identified as a signatory, but as a non-revenue partner. And that's because all of the Tier 3 agencies that receive mostly regional benefits don't have to contribute cash toward the match for the grants. I guess you could say it becomes voluntary at that point, so if you wish to volunteer. The partnership has come together actually really nicely. We have a functioning partnership with all of the agencies now. You can see that we've made excellent progress on securing contributions of cash toward match. In fact, the partnership has arranged for almost $75 million of the $130 million so far. About 73 of that from contributions from the ports and cities and Pierce County, and then the balance is from a grant that has already been received by the project. So I'll show you a little bit more about what we're doing with the grants. We have 5 major grants that have been in process this spring. The Fife Interurban Trail was actually pursued by the city of Fife in partnership with us, and they have actually secured that funding now. And their match plus all of the grant money that's raised by these grant pursuits go to offset that $130 million. The program has now submitted a Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board application that is in the rating process. We actually have an interview for that project in about 2 weeks here. And then we have 3 major Puget Sound Regional Council regional grant applications that have been submitted. And those are now in the process of being reviewed and rated at the Puget Sound Regional Council. So we're making, I think at this point, very good progress toward the overall goal. It's some of you know that I ran grant programs for the last 16 years, and I pursued grants for the agencies that I worked for more than 10 years before that. And I'm used to raising $10, $15, $20 million for projects, but $130 million is a great deal of money to raise. So the fact that we now have a functioning partnership and that we're making some progress is very good news. The MOU, as I said, is we're right at the point right now of partner concurrence on the MOU. We have a subcommittee meeting on Thursday where the final draft is intended to be released for council review. And then we have a number of council meetings scheduled in the next 2 weeks. So we're already entering the ratification process, which, based on the legislative directive, is to be completed by July. So we want to be able to get the MOU executed and delivered to the legislature on time. We have a major opportunity to finally complete these corridors. So I've been personally involved in this project since 1984. The project manager for 167 has been working on it his entire career. And we do not want this local partnership to be the thing that prevents us from getting there. So we're making great progress. We think we're going to get this done, and we hope to have this issue out of the way so we can break ground next year as planned. With that, is Hong going to... Any questions at this point?
Council, any questions? Councilmember Seth Dawson.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My question is 509, from SeaTac and the 509 from Tacoma are not going to connect that.
That's right. The plan to actually connect 509 in Tacoma and 509 to SeaTac is about 40 years old. And a number of years ago, it was realized that there was so much urban development that had occurred in those intervening years that it would be better to take 509 over to I-5, and what's happening down in the tide flats is 509 is turning over and connecting to I-5 at the 5 curve.
Thank you.
All right. Council, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Great job. And Steve's a federal way-in. Lives nearby several of us.
So when the legislature put together the package in 2015, as I mentioned, the Gateway Program was the number one. But the reasons it got there, if you talk to legislative leadership, it was because there was this constituents saying we can get the $130 million of local contributions, but there was also $180 million of tolling that was coming towards that, which really is a user pay. If you don't drive on it, you don't pay. You drive on it, you pay. The thing to think about with tolling on these particular facilities, they don't exist. They haven't existed for 25 years, 40 years out there. So you hear stories like 520 of you put tolls on 520 and people divert it to Bothell, things of that nature. This is actually dealing with more like attraction. How many people will use a new facility with a toll that will come off of local streets, things of that nature. So we actually see some traffic dynamics that way. I know tolling is somewhat controversial. I've worked on it for 8 years and so forth, and getting it in the state. You look at what we're looking at right now, the legislature has authorized 5 toll facilities. 4 of them are operating. The 99 tunnel will open up here likely at the end of this year. Tolling will begin next year for that. The legislature actually has to pass a bill up or down on each facility. So they'll be doing the same thing for 167 and 509, but they've already said their intent for funding. They've already have the studies behind them to move forward with that. But it is part of a system, and the more that we have, the more economies of scale happens in the actual collection of tolls. What tolling would look like to get to $180 million, the toll rates are not set. They're actually set by a Washington State Transportation Commission, which are appointed by the governor. They set ferry rates also. We are working through scenarios and kind of the details of that and doing forecasts and working through that. As I mentioned, agency will look at toll authorization probably in the 2019 session with the legislature. And again, as I mentioned, the commission will set the toll rates. But the tolling will not be like 167 through Auburn. It's not a hot lane. It's not a single lane that's hot. If you've been across 520 Floating Bridge, it's exactly like that. It's basically, there's no toll booths. You drive through, there's a price. It's more during the peaks. It's less during the off-peak. You have 80% of our trips, people already have a good-to-go pass in their car. The other 20% of the trips, we take a picture of the license plate and we bill them through the mail system as we go. So that's what we'll be looking at. As I mentioned, there's 4 lanes on each facility. 167 has 4 lanes, 519 up in King County 4 lanes, and there will be a toll point for those. Here, these are actually the toll points. For 519, the green, it will be south of the airport. And for 167, it will be also on the west side as well as you might call it the east side of I-5. So if you're going from Puyallup over to I-5, you only pay going through 1 toll point. If you're going all the way to 509 to go into, like, say, downtown Tacoma or the port, you would actually pass through 2 toll points, so those be additive. That's the way it works like on turnpikes. If you're in Pennsylvania, you drive a certain distance, you get charged for that. Far as that's just kind of a quick summary of the tolling. The intent here was not to get into all the detail, but it is something I want people to be aware of as we work through this, and your constituents and those that be using it. Right now, we actually have 4 key things we're going to deliver to the legislature this summer. So Steve talked about the local funding memorandum of understanding, and get the signatures on that, get that understanding with those partner agencies out there. We have what we call a construction implementation plan that's going to define this is the scope, this is the schedule, this is the budget, and this is the staging that we will use to build the project. And we have consensus with our stakeholders on that. We're looking at schedule acceleration, as I mentioned. Could we do this project 3 years earlier? Could we do it 5 years earlier? What would it look like to finance? We almost save $100 million if we actually could build this project more on a regular schedule rather than waiting for the cash flow to come. So there's a cost of time that we need to factor into this. And then we need to give them information on the traffic and the revenue and what tolling would look like so they can start their deliberations. Upcoming meetings, we have different committee structures. I appreciate Federal Way and your staff participating in that. I've advocated for that. These projects are not in Federal Way, but you actually see benefits of going south to Tacoma because of this project, going out to Puyallup because of the project. You see benefits going to Tukwila, going to the Duwamish area because of these projects. So I think it's something that's important, and this transportation system is a whole system where I-5, 509, 167, the light rail all integrate together, and I think it's important for the city to stay engaged in that. I mentioned earlier that the Triangle Project is actually important to us and how everything fits together on that I-5 system. And so with that, I'll have Hung give you an overview of the Triangle Project.
So the Triangle Project I'm going to be talking about is the area that's formed by I-5, Highway 18, and Highway 161. There's been a lot of work that was done over the year to improve this area. The last construction work that was finished was in 2012. Everything you see out there was completed in 2013. And then in 2013, we actually received some money from the legislature to update the design and the environmental documentations for what's shown on the screen here with the yellow portion of it, basically the southbound ramp from I-5 to Highway 161. And so that work is basically is done in 2015 as part of the Connecting Washington project program. We received another $85 million for improvements here. And as you can see on the screen here, the fundings start becoming available in July 2021 and spread out over 3 different bienniums. And so the plan here is that the first thing that we're going to improve is that orange part, since we already made progress on that. And then whatever money is left is going to go to that blue part, which is the northbound I-5 off-ramp to eastbound Highway 18. So a little bit overview of the yellow part here that we're going to, the improvements, and I'll talk a little more details. So the yellow part here is going to improve, make the new connections to Highway 161. Then it's going to be connected to Highway 161 at 2 different points. One at 356, another one is at the existing off-ramp to existing ramp, flower ramp from Highway 18 down to 161. So the improvements at Highway 18, we're just going to be eliminating the loop ramp. That's going to currently, if you go down southbound I-5, you can loop over to go to Highway 18. And then all traffic now, traffic wants to go east on Highway 18, we have to take the what's shown here on the blue, and then they can go east on Highway 18. One of the reasons why this work is that with the new connection to Highway 161, there's a lot of traffic that's going to go directly down there. You don't have to go through these intersections. So this will make things work a little better. The new connections to Highway 356, and I think back in 2015, I was here talking to some of you folks that was here about these improvements. There'll be a new off-ramp to Highway 356 at 161. It's going to look something like what you see on the screen here. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is, let's see if I can make this work. Oops. So one of the reasons we're doing this is number of reasons. So this roundabout here that you can see on this tiny roundabout here is meant to align with a road that you have planned. I think it's called, I forgot what the road is. It's supposed to go to the back of Home Depot there. And then this big roundabout here, you can see in the existing picture here, there's 2 signals here that's really close together. And if we don't eliminate that signal, it just doesn't work well. To be able to put more traffic to that into the intersections. So this roundabout will make things work much better. And because of this, we have to do a little improvements at the 20th Avenue intersections with 161. And this is just on the east side of I-5. With the new roundabout, with all the traffic feeding out there, the traffic is just getting here too fast, and the signal is just not going to process the traffic through this these intersections. So making this minor improvement will help with that, making sure that that works. And then lastly, if we have any of that $85 million left, we're going to proceed to make these improvements on the northbound I-5 off-ramp to Highway 18. And the reason we don't know how much money we have left is because we've been carrying these estimates for the southbound off-ramp part. That's sitting somewhere around $50 million. But we know that with the markets the way it is, we've been seeing bids coming in very, very high. And a lot of things, we haven't bought any of the right-of-way that we need for that, for the improvements that we have at 356. And we know how the real estate market has been moving like crazy. So by the time we come around to do this, we don't know how much it's going to cost. So, any questions?
Council, Councilmember Moore?
I have a really quick question for Craig, I believe. Or you can maybe help me direct the question to a specific individual. But so in looking at, and I'm going to be really fast here because I know we're heading up against time, but it sounds like, I'm interested in the tolls.
Okay.
Because as you can imagine, Greg, a lot of communities are being impacted heavily with taxes and those type of things. So naturally, I want to be interested in that. So help me understand here, and I could. So one of the diagrams on page, I'm going to say 30, slide number 30. So if you're on 509, going up north towards the airport, you're going to be hit with at least, if you're traveling 509, you're good, or I believe that's 509, yes. You're going to be hitting a toll. That's on the north end. If you're moving south onto 5 and you're going into Milton, you're going to be hitting up two tolling stations or electronic devices that act like a toll on 167. So I see these images, and I obviously can only imagine that it's only these areas. Is there other areas that are kind of around Federal Way that are going to be impacted by tolls? And if you've mentioned this, forgive me for asking this again. But
No, these are the toll points that we have, and it's only the new lanes that are being built with this project will be tolled. So all the free lanes that are already on 509 north of 188 stay free.
Yeah, and that model already exists.
Right, and same with 167. But there are no other plans regarding other facilities that are talking about. So this is specifically to this, to these two.
So the new lane is going to be tolled, but the other normal, regular lanes that have been traveled on.
Well, I want to be real clear. The green line of 509 coming from the airport over to I-5 does not exist today.
Right.
Right.
So
that'll be a brand-new facility with 4 lanes, 2 lanes each direction, but all 4 of those lanes will be tolled. So if you drive from 188 south around the airport to I-5, you will pay a toll. It'll be higher during the peaks, lower, we're talking about something between $2 to $3 in the peaks, maybe 90 cents, 50 cents in the off-peak going forward. But once you hit I-5, as you come down I-5 in that green, that's just additional lanes on I-5. No one would pay for that.
Right.
Particular.
Okay.
Councilmember Duclos?
I want to talk about the tide flats a little bit.
Sure.
Is that going to be tolled also?
Just again.
Because a lot of us from Federal
Right.
Way take the back way down and into Tacoma, and so we go through the shipping area down there.
Right. So all the existing roads and all those routes will stay free. Only the new lanes coming off of I-5 that will swing around to tie into I-5, kind of close to Alexander,
Okay.
where that crossing is. Only, again, the new lanes would have a toll on them
Okay.
on that side. So basically, it gives you a choice. Someone could say, if they're coming in from, I don't know, say Bonnie Lake, they can make a choice. Do I say
Right.
the route that I've always gone on, or do I want to take the new route? That new route might cost me $1 today or something to do that. So that's
Yeah.
the choice.
No, but I was, those of us that live on this side of
Yeah,
Federal Way, we
exactly.
usually, to get to Tacoma, go down.
If you come in through northeast Tacoma, come down the
Right.
old 509.
Right, yeah.
I will mention the existing 509 out to Dash Point and everything. We're going to rename that or something because we can't have multiple 509s. But again, 509 was always planned to be an Elliott Bay to Commencement Bay facility. It will come down from First Avenue South, which ties into the new tunnel up in 99, goes down I-5 and comes back around here to tie into downtown Tacoma. But the route that takes you out through Federal Way and everything, it's the only facility I know where you have 60 miles an hour in some places and basically a hairpin turn another place, and on a state highway it's called the same number. So we'll probably have to renumber that. Yeah.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. I have a question on the roundabout. And my question is, Sound Transit will be working in that area eventually? And are you working with Sound Transit, and how will this impact Sound Transit's?
Yeah, so
Route.
we are working with Sound Transit. I understand they haven't picked the alternative yet. So, but we're working closely with them to make sure that everything fits together.
Will you be doing construction at about the same time?
I don't remember when the construction is, but our construction is expected to be about 2023.
Okay,
So we're pretty close.
thank you.
All right. Councilmember Morgan.
Craig, I have a humorous question. I'm hoping you'll laugh at this one.
Okay.
You guys have done a poll, I'm sure, on what the public's favorability is on tolling.
Right.
And I gathered that some have said, yes, we're willing to do this. I heard you say that earlier.
Right.
But I'm just kind of curious, do you guys have the type of stats that say this many favor it, this many against us, or against?
I've seen a lot of polls that we've done here in Central Puget Sound. I've seen national things of that nature. So let me give you kind of a perspective. We know there's about 30% of the population that hate tolls. It's double taxation. They would feel, I already pay a gas tax, I shouldn't have to pay for it. And it doesn't change. We've seen that in San Diego. We've seen that up here. There's always going to be that contingent that's there. On the other hand, when we've done surveys, would you like to see sales tax increased for transportation? Would you like to see gas tax increased for transportation? Would you like to see tolls? Tolls comes out as almost overwhelming supported because everybody thinks somebody else is going to pay for that facility and it will be them paying rather than me. So you get a whole wide range of perspectives. I've been involved, like I said, 8 years of getting the tolling up in Green. I was on Mercer Island with just a lot of controversy when we even started talking about putting tolls in I-90. I will say in this particular area, there's more of it doesn't exist now, I don't have to pay it, I just use it what I'm going to. It might be there if I want to use it. And it's more just of a recognition that I wish you didn't have to toll it, but no one's fighting it, put it that way.
Yeah, and I think that, and I appreciate that information, certainly, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you because I really do hope that, and I expect that Washington State Department of Transportation will be communicating with our residents. We'll have plenty of town halls, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But I have to say that this is a true working class
Correct.
of families that we have here.
Right.
And so if they're going to be going the route that there's a toll placed, and I know that it's probably too late at this time, so I understand that, but I think it's important to note that families being hit, $4 every time they have to drive, surely I could assume they're going to try and find another way.
Right.
But it still has to be noticed that I'm concerned about that factor.
No, that's fair.
But I appreciate you being here.
Okay.
So.
All right, council, any other questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, is there any citizen comment? Citizen comment? Okay, thank you. Council, questions or discussion? Council? No? Okay, we've got about 8 or 9 minutes before the council meeting. Thank you very much for a very thoughtful and a thorough presentation. We appreciate it. The special meeting is adjourned for now, and then we'll recess, or we'll come back in about 8 minutes or reconvene.